Hello, everyone. I want to welcome everyone today to our first customer series on Critigen, where they are going to speak to you about how they resolved and prevented Citrix's slow complaints for all of their users, even when the root cause wasn't Citrix. So today, my name is Stacy Leidwinger, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Goliath Technologies and will be serving as your moderator. Now, before we jump in, I want to go through a few housekeeping items and set some expectations. So first, we're just going to set up the challenges and talk a little bit about Critigen, who's a global professional service provider, as well as Goliath for some context setting. I promise to keep that short. Then we're going to really jump into today's topic, where John Bennett from Critigen is going to talk about the challenges that he was facing on a day-to-day basis and how he leveraged purpose-built technologies to troubleshoot those issues, find root cause, resolve, and ultimately monitor over time. And we're going to talk about real specific problems around slow logon times, session latency issues, and also how to monitor during large projects, specifically around a project to migrate from on-prem into the cloud for the entire Citrix infrastructure. The webinar itself will run about 30-45 minutes. If you have questions, please put them into the Q&A or the chat box, and we will address them most likely at the end, but if there's some relevant ones while we're talking, we'll make sure to get them in. And yes, everyone is going to receive a copy of this webinar today. The last piece is we also are going to show some demos of the technology. So Yemi Ladyju, who's our senior technical consultant here at Goliath, will be really showcasing everything that John talks about. So without further ado, let's jump in, and I'd like to formally introduce John Bennett. He works for Critigen in the UK. He leads the project controls practice for Critigen, and he has used Citrix and supported Citrix environments going all the way back to the MetaFrame 20 years ago. So we have a true expert on the line. He now brings his managed IT experiences with Citrix along with Oracle Primavera to deliver successful solutions around the globe. Now, John, why don't you give us just a little bit more background around Critigen and the services that you provide?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Stacey. Hi, everybody. I'm John Bennett. I work for Critigen. We are just celebrating our 10-year anniversary of independence since we used to be part of CH2M Hill and as their technology services department, and we were basically created in 2009. So we've been 10 years independent since. So we share a long heritage of complex infrastructure programs and projects all around the world. And we've been providing the systems behind that successful projects and programs for a long, long time. But Critigen is 10 years young or old as of this month. So that's us. We're really primarily a geospatial business. We do lots of things with things like the maps, Esri, ArcGIS, and those things. And my area is all around the project control space. So things like Oracle Primavera is one of the key products that supports those kind of processes. So we provide those solutions to a number of sectors all around the world. The one we're going to focus on today is around UK construction, but there's very applicable processes in UK defence that we've also worked with Goliath on, and many other sectors. But today we're going to talk about UK construction, where they have a Citrix farm and deploying Primavera P6 to their users from a variety of devices, which I'll come into more detail on. And that's really me for now. Thanks, Stacey.
Thanks, John. And then I promise, last little piece from me, but I did want to give everyone a little bit of background on Goliath. We provide monitoring and troubleshooting software for hybrid IT environments. Today we're spending a bit of the time talking more around Citrix, but we also do this for VMware Horizon environments. We use our embedded intelligence and automation so any IT pro can anticipate, troubleshoot, and prevent end-user experience issues, regardless of where those IT workloads or users are located. And so here you just see a sampling of our customers, right? We work with customers in a variety of industries, a variety of sizes, really helping them troubleshoot and identify root cause for things like logon slowness, session slowness, other performance issues that comes up for end users, whether it be Oracle Primavera or in healthcare EHR applications. if there's anyone here on the line in healthcare, we actually have purpose-built modules that allow you to troubleshoot and monitor across those major EHR environments, Epic, Cerner, Allscripts, Meditech, as well as your IT delivery infrastructure and end user behavior. And the good news is you don't have to just believe me. You're going to see that software in action backed up with John's story here in a minute. So with that, John, why don't you talk to the audience today about what was the day in the life of John prior to using Goliath?
Yeah, great. So I guess the first thing to really talk about is a quick architecture of what Oracle Primavera really is. So it's really a client-server, quite a chatty application between where you're running the client software and where the database is. So you nearly always will use something like Citrix to deliver that client or control that client out to your user base. So I've been doing this I was introduced for a good 20 years now. We're running very similar P6 software through this Citrix experience for quite a long time. And I've always really, just being honest, I've always really struggled with countering whether it's the network, whether it's the server, whether it's storage, whether it's the database, whether it's the application architecture, all kinds of things. So when people say, it's slow, but their colleague is doing well, then what are those differences? And really, it's been quite a long struggle up until Goliath and I started working a couple of years ago now. And the other key sort of part to think about P6 is it's a project planning and scheduling tool that's used by dedicated people who rely on this for 8 to 12 hours a day, uninterrupted. They need to be thinking about large complex projects, could be tens of thousands of lines of activities, many resources and lots of cost information all going through the system. And any kind of outage or any kind of interruption is frustrating. It hurts them. It gives them, it can in some cases give them cost impacts and in delays if they're not delivering reports on time. So it's a very important service to that part of delivering projects in these organizations. And as I say, I've always really struggled in getting down to the root causes, because it's always a bit of a guessing game where we need to focus your energy. So you kind of spread it everywhere in the hope that something is maybe a silver bullet out there that fixes these things. But yeah, that's really where we came from. So we worked with Goliath a couple of years ago now, and I'm going to take you through some of those scenarios and give you a bit more sort of detail in those problems we were having, really. So yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go through 3 of those scenarios with you, and I'll give you the first one now. Next slide. So these Primavera P6 planners could be all over the country, could be in porta cabins at building sites, they could be in major offices with really good network connections, and it's very difficult to really understand if there's a problem that something you can fix from the data center end, or whether it's something local, whether they're using a tethering on their own phone that you're not aware of, all kinds of ranges of network connectivity, different networks, different IT departments, different laptop builds, different operating systems, browsers, all kinds of things. We never really got to know. You would ask questions, and a lot of these people wouldn't really know the right answers because they're not IT literate type people at heart. They're project planners. They think about delivering concrete and steel and railways and things like that. So again, we struggled really to understand what the complex infrastructure was really out there in terms of networks, in terms of laptops. And you would hear stories that people were saying, well, it's really slow today, I can't log in, or it's taking me 5 minutes to get connected. And you'd really struggle to understand why. So what we did, we brought Goliath in and we set up the software and we let it monitor and collect in all this data. And we could straight away see that there was maybe 20% of the users that were suffering out there. You could tell straight away that it was taking minutes, and it was taking minutes in certain places in the journey as well. It was whether it was them logging, connecting to the websites, logging in their details, connecting to the Citrix server, and then launching the applications. There's a whole range of things that Yemi will take you through in a few minutes that we really got a huge insight into, and we found out that actually some of these sort of more suffering people were also running older versions of Citrix Receiver, because we were able to quickly see what versions they were coming from, what IP addresses they had, what versions of Windows they had, and so on. And one of the big recommendations was, you guys on this old ICA client from 10 years ago or so, you probably need to upgrade that. So we pushed out a new recommendation to roll out to a newer version of receiver and workspace. And then, of course, magically, everything started improving after that. And it was really good insight that a lot of these people didn't know what versions they were running, and we didn't know either. And it was great that Goliath could show us that. Yemi, so it's a good time for you to show us that.
Absolutely, thanks. Thanks, John. So to talk a little bit about, how that's actually done inside of the technology, where we're looking at now is our Citrix virtual apps and desktop session display. And just as John mentioned, this is where people come to troubleshoot issues in their environment. So when a user is calling in, complaining about a log-on time that's really high or maybe sustained latency, this is where you would go. But another typical reason why people get to the screen, or how they get to the screen, is by the technology itself alerting you to the fact that a particular user has experienced some sort of issue inside of their session, whether it's an application crash, whether it's a latency issue, or in this case, a problem with the logon. So from here, what customers are able to do is just start to understand exactly what's going on in the environment. So as John mentioned, being able to sort of pull up all of those sessions in the environment that have high logon times, and sort and filter and pull back historic sessions if they need to. This screen is really designed with some personalization to allow you to sort of customize your troubleshooting experience so that, again, you can isolate the sessions as quickly as possible so that you can troubleshoot. So you sort here, you can also filter for a particular user. So if I'm looking for one of my sessions, as I start to type, it automatically dynamically changes. I can look for a delivery group. I can look for a certain receiver version, which is something we're going to talk about in this particular scenario. But once you've isolated a session that you want to take a look at, let's take, for instance, Joe Allen's session, right? This is a historic session, and you can see that there are some logon times here that aren't very pleasant. So let's actually try and troubleshoot this. So once you click on an individual user session, there's a pop-up of about 8 tabs giving you all the information you need to troubleshoot any particular issue in this session, starting off with the summary tab. Now, the summary tab really pulls in together a lot of those core metrics and the information you need for some quick troubleshooting. A lot of our customers really like this because you have the ability to come up with quick answers, right? So when someone says Citrix is slow, for instance, here is where you can actually identify if they mean a logon issue, if they mean it's a round trip time or session performance issue, and really start to go from there. So in this case, you can see here a high-level summary or breakdown of the logon process, and you can click now here on logon summary, which I assume that's what John did when he was isolating these particular sessions that were experiencing issues in the environment. And now in this logon duration page, or this logon page, now you have information to troubleshoot, right? So what's going on during the brokering stages of the logon process here? So particularly what's going on at the delivery controller. And here is where John mentioned, being able to see issues taking place at Citrix receiver. And this is without deploying any technology to the individual endpoints across the environment. He's able to then see things like ICA file download, or how long it took to establish the micro VPN connections, how long it took for the overall startup time at that client, overall session creation at that client. And typically when we're talking about outdated receiver versions, the two major issues would be in session creation time and session lookup time. So those are two specific things that you could point to as saying, okay, this is being caused by an older receiver version, which you can actually see here on the logon screen as well. So that's actually where you're able to use this portion to be able to troubleshoot that specific issue where you don't have objective evidence to prove that it's Citrix receiver that's causing problems. But keep in mind, this page also has a ton of more information to be able to troubleshoot. For instance, being able to take a look at authentication and see what OUs this user is a part of and what domain controller brokered the session, how long it took for those LDAP calls, what files were being accessed during this particular user's profile loading. You can also see what group policies are being executed for a particular user's logon. So down to the policy name and the time that it took to execute. So you can collapse the troubleshooting time frame, find exactly what's causing the issues, as opposed to spending your time looking for these issues. John, do you have any other sort of examples of other issues that you were able to troubleshoot with this logon duration screen?
Yeah, that's a great one as well. So around that brokering service, so we've got load balanced delivery controllers, and what we didn't know at the time was that one of them was actually quite unhealthy. It was high CPU, and it was then slowing everybody down. And what you could, well, at least half of the people down. So what you could see in Goliath was those who were getting the slower logon duration was also the people that were going through the unhealthy delivery controller. So that focused our attention that we needed to address something there, because the people that were going through the more available server were getting a great experience. But we didn't know that until we saw this on this dashboard here.
Yeah, that's a great example, and again, it just points back to the amount of detail that you get, showing you all of the components that actually help deliver Citrix for that user, so that you can then make those correlations. Now, John, I'm going to pass it back to you to talk about the next troubleshooting scenario.
Yeah, that's great. So this is a great story for me, I guess personally. We had hundreds of users all over the country, all accessing P6, but there was one new project office that had just started up for us. They had 35 people all working on the same project, and they were really having a bad time right from the first day, really. They were reporting network dropouts, or the session would drop out, the freezing, the screen would just disappear from them. They really just couldn't work, and I explained before that these planners really need to get their attention into the tool, and every few minutes their screen would disappear. It was really getting quite frustrating to them, and we would point fingers. Is it the network then that's doing that? Is it their PCs? Is it their power saving settings? All sorts of things that we would try and guess at to understand. But what we did is it got to a crisis point really with this project where we all had to go to site. Basically, there was a big emergency status. So what we needed to do was provide some data that it wasn't us, because the rest of the community by now were getting great experiences. We knew it was just these 35 at this site, but we couldn't prove it until we had Goliath. And what we did then is I prepared for this 2-hour meeting where it was all going to be very pointy fingers to everybody who's gonna action this resolution. And I took some printouts from the Goliath screen of the charts that Yimi's going to show you in a few seconds. And what's on the slide now is we were immediately able to show that these guys were also getting high round trip times, high latency, and Citrix just doesn't like that. It needs consistent, reliable networks. And whenever you would ask them, oh, is it the network? They would say, oh, well, Google was working fine, or other web pages are working fine. They didn't really understand the uniqueness of Citrix relying on that good speed, good reliable network. And we were able to show in Goliath that they were getting these good connections, but then all of a sudden their network would drop, their latency would go up, their round trip time would go into seconds. And just from memory, I remember one person that had 120,000 millisecond round trip time. And if you think every time he presses his key, he's got to make 2 minutes for that key to appear on the screen and come back. I couldn't imagine that person trying to work. It must have been so terrible for them. So we were able to take this data into the meeting, where it was all going to be very heated, but actually it was all over in 30 minutes, because we said, look, there's clearly an issue here at the network. And the network guys said, yeah, there must be. So they've taken that and they took that away and they investigated and they resolved the root cause. But without that data, it would have been a much more difficult meeting for me. So it was a real good success for me. And I thank Goliath for that. Yemi?
Yeah, John, and that's another thing that we hear a lot when it comes to collaborating between different teams to be able to to come up with answers. So let's go through exactly the process that, customers like John will go through when they have to isolate or try to pinpoint exactly what's causing an issue in any particular user session. And lo and behold, we start again at the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop session display. Again, here's where you see all of those individual sessions taking place, historic sessions as well, so you can go back and granularly be able to identify what has changed, what is impacting any session across the entire environment. So in this case, again, you're here being able to isolate a particular user session, click down on the user, and now again you get a pop-up of about 8 tabs showing you all the information you need to troubleshoot. Now, we mentioned the summary tab in the first example, and again, the summary tab here comes into play because you have, again, all of the major sort of information you need to troubleshoot a particular user session. And if you don't have enough here, you also have the requisite tabs to be able to do some further troubleshooting. So in this case, actually, all of those metrics that John mentioned, right, the ICA round trip time, the network latency, and the connection speed, they're all here on the summary tab. So the process typically is you would click on round trip time and identify if this user is having a spike or having a poor performance inside of their session based on their round trip time. And then correlate that back to network latency. This is real-time network latency, not the typical ICMP or ping-based network latency. This is network latency that we're getting from the ICA protocol itself. We're extracting this, and we're showing you exactly if network connectivity is actually the restricting or bottlenecking factor for this particular user session. And as you can assume, for those sessions that were having particular issues, I'm sure the network latency was really, really high. But that's where we can take it a little bit further with the Goliath solution, because we're not only able to give you real-time network latency, we're also able to show real-time user connection speed. This is the amount of bandwidth that is available for Citrix receiver wherever this user is connecting in from, which is important when you have different offices, as John mentioned, or different locations where users are connecting in from varying networks. You can exactly see how much bandwidth they have allocated for this process or for Citrix itself, and then point to that as being the root cause of issues. So at network latency spikes, you typically would then see drops in connection speed, which then shows you specifically that the network constraint was actually being limited by the poor connection speed at that user's endpoint that was actually causing those issues. And so that's sort of the the summary tab, how you can come up with quick answers. If you wanted to drill down even further, you can click here on the ICA-HCX, and it takes you directly to the ICA-HCX channel tab, where you can sort of take a look at ICA latency, network latency, and round trip time on the same chart to make some correlations. Keep in mind that you can zoom into sections of this chart as well as zoom out, so really add some functionality that a lot of customers like. You can confirm with the network connection speed and bandwidth here on the right-hand side. And now these bottom two charts give you insight into user behavior, which is another factor that can restrict connectivity. So being able to see what the user is doing inside of their session and being able to collaborate with the network team to be able to provide a network experience that is able to support that user's behavior is another way that our customers are able to leverage this portion of the technology, specifically not only to solve issues, but to collaborate internally so that you can fix them moving forward. With that, I'm going to send it back to John to talk about the final scenario.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. And just one point really back on all the great charts you were just showing us there. What you can also do is look at them back over time as well. So if the person's saying, well, it was working okay on Thursday, but not on Friday, you can look at the charts from both those days. And in often the cases are the network speed is a clear indicator that actually on the Thursday when it was good, you've got a higher network speed. You were probably in the office, but now you're on a much lower speed. Are you at home, or are you on a mobile phone? And these are things that often people don't volunteer information. It was slow because I was at a different location. It is not always obvious when people report these things. And going back through the interface in Goliath and looking at that person's sessions, going back even months, you can configure that for. You can see, yeah, that actually he's getting a great connection speed on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of the week. Let's find out where he is, because that's something we need to learn from. But again, that was something I just picked up when I was watching Yemi just then. So our final kind of scenario we wanted to talk about was this construction company we've been working with. They were running in one data center, and what they wanted to do was move into their own managed Azure managed cloud themselves. So what we did, we had Goliath running in the old world, monitoring all the as-is, all the connections, all the users accessing P6 from the current environment while we prepared the new Azure new P6 environment. We had Goliath stood up there as well, and we were able to see during any of the testing, any of the migration, whether the same user was then getting a better or worse experience, or even the same, so that we could kind of ensure ourselves that if we did flip the switch and migrate it across, then we didn't then start getting an influx of people saying, oh, well, now it's slow, because it's almost too late now. We've been running a project to migrate. That was the time when we had all our resources around to try and address and identify network issues and resolve them then. So we had a really successful project, kind of supported by Goliath, being in both places at the same time, giving us all that data that we could analyze. And that works really well for us. And as I say, that was a successful project. We now kind of moved Goliath now into more of a proactive space. We've kind of addressed all those problems we've talked about over the last year or so. They've all been either resolved by versions or networks, or all the other things that we've been able to help identify the causes of data and then find owners for them. We now really look at Goliath as more of a watchman or a monitor for us. So what it does is it gives us lots and lots of reporting on alerts. So we ask it to report disk space, disk performance, high session usage, high memory on any particular user in Citrix. If they're exceeding a lot of memory, they may be taking away resources from other people, things that we can now just sort of kind of sit back and we get the alerts. We either get them in emails or alerts in PDF reports, and it really just, like I say, it gives us a really insight. Sometimes, even recently, we've been informed of problems that no one else has been aware of. It told us that a service was not running on a server, and it then restarted it for us. These are things that in the past we probably wouldn't have known until a user started connecting and couldn't, and then we would have to have spent some investigation. That was completely avoided now by all this inbuilt monitoring rules. So again, it's another really great story there, that Goliath's been able to help us overcome that initial pain, but now give us a really confident platform to move forward with. So yeah, I just really wanted to go to the next slide and summarize, please. So really, what we could have done, I was thinking, if we hadn't have gone for Goliath, what would we have done? We would probably have thrown hardware at the solution, give the servers more memory. We'd have tried in hope that might have fixed things, or we might have brought in more specialists from outside, maybe brought in a Citrix consultant or something. But really, what we found was the best business case was actually data. We needed to find out where the problem was, so that we could then start fixing it. And that's where it was kind of a no-brainer from a business case point of view. Bring Goliath in, get the data, and then you could then use that to move forward with. And that's really kind of the key takeaway from here, was the data was so important from us, which then meant that we were able to migrate from the on-premise data center to the Azure data center service, and that was all very successful. And we've been able to make sure that was a smooth transition, so the users are happy, the services continued, and yeah, all thanks to Goliath. And that's kind of me. I guess handing back to Stacey.
Great. Well, thank you, John and Yemi. I wanted to give everyone a few more minutes to put any questions you have in the chat or question box. And as we do that, I really did want to summarize what you just saw, both in demonstration as well as articulated through John's stories. What you saw from Goliath is a purpose-built tool that really offers at its core 3 things to help everyone here on the phone really troubleshoot and identify issues to help your end users. And with that, we're offering embedded intelligence and automation so that we can proactively not only troubleshoot, but prevent those issues, as John just pointed out in his last story. It's also providing those broad and deep metrics across the entire delivery infrastructure, whether it be Citrix or VMware Horizon, as well as end user behavior. So one of the things that Yemi lightly touched on when you talk about kind of ICA round trip time, sure, it might be session or network latency, but there's also end user behavior that can impact that, and we can monitor it. Meaning, do they have a large audio file running in the background? Do they have multiple of the same application open at once? And then, as I mentioned earlier on, we didn't show this here, but if you are in healthcare, we have purpose-built modules for all major EHR applications to provide visibility around that as well. And finally, as John pointed out, we have historical reports and analytics to really foster those data-driven conversations with internal IT teams, other vendors, as well as users themselves. That data really allows you to look back over time and see exactly what was happening. I think, John, you hinted at it, but we're very kind. Unfortunately, when you talk to end users, they have a different view of what's going on. They forget all the details. Of course, there's nothing that was going on playing in the background. And we give you those insights and that real hard factual information over time that can really make a difference in your conversation. So with that, we got a few questions lined up here. I think the first one really is for Yemi, and one of the questions was, John mentioned, working with Primavera and seeing some different delays. I think I talked about EHR applications, but the question was, is there a way to see how applications or processes are running are impacting perhaps session performance or session latency?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, I think it will be probably a little bit more helpful to show you inside of the product. So let's flip back over to the technology here. So here we're looking at that session that we isolated earlier. And specifically, we have a dedicated tab here in that session drill down to show you all of the processes and applications that are running inside of a user session. I mean, this has come in very handy for a lot of customers, whether it's a shared desktop or shared application environment where you have multiple users on a specific server, and you can isolate and see how the processes for each one of those users are actually affecting the environment, or in this case, in a VDI session where you could see how that those processes or applications in this case are affecting or utilizing resources on that server or on that machine that's actually sort of adding times or adding issues to the environment. Keep in mind that we also have a set of monitoring rules that are going to alert you preemptively to the fact that a particular process or application is causing issues inside of a user's session.
Great. The next question is probably a mix both of Yemi and John. We have someone on here that's an MSP, and they're wondering how you monitor multiple environments, and are you able to do that, assuming you have multiple customers running, let's say, Citrix or VMware Horizon? Maybe, Yemi, you want to talk about what Goliath does, and then John give some insights on how you actually do this in your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing to point out about the Goliath sort of solution is it has native multi-tenancy. So it has the ability to sort of allow you to monitor multiple different applications or multiple different environments from one single console natively and out of the box. And typically how the first way that people do that is, first of all, you're able to see all of the sessions taking place from all of those different environments. You can filter based on different customer environments and things like that. Another way that a lot of our customers leverage that multi-tenancy is by leveraging this automatic discovery and dependency map for Citrix. And specifically for MSPs, what they like is the fact that this automatically discovers the environment. So if you're brought in to troubleshoot an environment or you're building it from scratch, you don't have to worry about the dependency maps or the different sort of configurations in architecture for every single one of your environments. It'll automatically map them out for you here, and then you have the ability to toggle between them here at the top left-hand side of the screen, so you can see exactly what's sort of impacting that individual environment. Also keep in mind that we have the product ships out of the box with over 300 monitoring rules, and these monitoring rules are applied to every single environment that an MSP would be managing. These monitoring rules are monitoring for specific conditions, failure points, and events. So what you now get is sort of this product that gives you embedded intelligence to alert you preemptively to issues that are going to occur or take place in any one of the environments that you're managing. John, did you have any other sort of things to add on to that?
Yeah, that was a great summary. I guess anything was going back to my story around the data center move. So we were still providing the support from the old and the new world, and Goliath was able to bridge the gap between the two and show us what the performance was like in both old servers and new servers from the single view. So yeah, that's a great story.
Yemi, thank you both. While you have this up, one of the questions that have come in, and I think this is a great way to maybe talk through it just a bit more, is, how do you really disqualify a large part of the environment that might not be the issue, right? So we spent a lot of time really focusing on what the issue is, but sometimes you have to start backwards, right, and disqualify what an issue is. Can you talk about how you use this automatic discovery map to potentially do that?
Absolutely. So what this piece of technology allows you to do is not only map out the environment, but to click through and see all of the different layers that help or that are a part of the Citrix delivery infrastructure or the architecture. So here on this infrastructure or physical view, what you're able to see is driven by those monitoring rules. You're able to see where issues are taking place in your environment. So right now everything's green, but as you can imagine, as issues or alerts start to bubble up based on any individual component, these components will then turn orange or red depending on the severity, and then you can exactly find where those issues are taking place. For instance, if you're going back to John's earlier point about those logon times being driven by a particular delivery controller, from here they would be able to see the problem delivery controller, whether it has, and click on the delivery controller and see on the right-hand side whether it has resource utilization issues, whether it has maybe a disk issue, maybe there's a service that's failing on that delivery controller that's causing issues. You would be able to see that here, rule out an entire or entity of the environment and focus on what's actually causing the problem. Another thing you can do is by clicking on the delivery layer, you now get a logical view of the entire delivery infrastructure, able to see the delivery controllers, delivery groups, machine catalogs, gold images if those are available. And a lot of times people have hybrid infrastructure, right? You have on-premises infrastructure and as well as infrastructure in the cloud. And what they like is the ability to click down into any particular delivery group, be able to see all of the infrastructure pieces that are actually helping to deliver Citrix for that delivery group down to the hypervisor layer if those are available. And then you can actually see on the right-hand side of the screen average end user experience metrics per hypervisor host. So you can, again, find exactly what's causing those macro issues or bottlenecks in your environment just by clicking through and following the reds or following the alerts that are triggering off in the environment.
Great, thanks, Yemi. Here's another one probably for you, and actually we've got a couple questions that kind of come into this, right? We've talked a little bit about, kind of Citrix gets blamed for everything, right? And how do you really convince other teams when the problem is or isn't Citrix? And I think this is really critical too, whether it's Citrix or VMware Horizon, is, we talk a lot about the embedded intelligence. You heard Yemi say it, I've said it. And one of the reasons we have this embedded intelligence and all the monitoring capabilities that Yemi's called out is we realize not everyone is a Citrix expert or a VMware Horizon expert, right? And so we're really trying to take that expertise and build it into the system to give you the tools like John showed you to have that data-driven conversations, right? And so when everyone's kind of pointing the fingers all back at Citrix, Yemi, what are some of the tools and some of the intelligence we offer so that they can truly diagnose? Is it Citrix or is it something else?
Yeah, and I think we touched on a little bit of that during the demonstrations, but I think a good place to start again would be the automatic discovery and dependency map, because you're able to see here all of the components that are actually contributing to Citrix for your entire environment. A lot of times it's being managed by different teams. There's the infrastructure team managing the hypervisor layer, or you have a team specifically for Active Directory, or a team specifically for PVS or things like that. So having everything pulled together in one single view, monitored by a product, that allows you to then identify if and when a particular issue is stemming from something that's being managed by a particular team, but still helping in delivering Citrix. So that's sort of the first portion, right? The next section would be the individual session display, and we touched on this a little bit, but this summary tab shows you all of the individual components in that user session that actually help deliver Citrix for that user. So what domain controller was a part of the session, what the delivery controller brokered the session, what storefront or NetScaler they used, what hypervisor host and VM. So you can see all of that and be able to then troubleshoot everything from the connection to the logon time to the VM itself, to the hypervisor layer, the applications, and even down to the event log level, right, where you can see any application and system error or warning events taking place on this particular VM for the time frame of this user session, so that you can collaborate with objective evidence, so that you can then fix these issues and prevent any, or put in place permanent fix actions to prevent them from happening again in the future.
Great, thanks, Yemi. And I think we've got one last question here. We've talked a little bit about the historical reports. Do you have any that are maybe around log-on times that they can share with kind of counterparts to foster those conversations? So do you have any examples of some of the reporting capabilities that we offer out of the box for those historical trends?
Absolutely. And I can pull this up here. So here's just a quick document that shows some of our most popular reports that people run on a scheduled basis in the environment. So the license usage reports is one that's very, very useful, and a lot of people like it, because if you're managing multiple environments, or if you're just monitoring or managing one environment, you want to be able to know what peak times look like when it's from a license perspective, what delivery groups or user groups are actually utilizing most of the licenses in your environment. That's one that a lot of customers really like. But when you talk about things like log-on times, a lot of our customers love these reports because they break it down based on the individual sections of the log-on time. So you can see how long brokering and client validation is taking, how long group policy processing is taking. For instance, we had a customer that was able to justify to management the purchase of new hardware because they were able to prove over time that group policies took shorter amounts of time, and brokering took shorter amount of time with some of these reports that trend out log-on times based on any metric that you would like them to trend on. So that's sort of another reason, or these are sort of the major ones when it comes to log-on times that a lot of our customers really like about the reporting functionality of Goliath.
Great, thank you. As promised, that was the last question. So I really want to thank John for joining us today and walking through some of the challenges and how you overcame them at Critigen. I know many of our audience members find that extremely valuable. If anyone has questions or if you're interested in a free trial, please send them to the email below. If you have specific questions for John, we will get them directly to him as well. So thank you again, and I hope everyone has a great day.